My name is Sita Mutyala, and today we are here as part of Foundation for India Studies, Houston. I'm interviewing Dr. Mathur and his wife, Srimati Nalini ji, for the Indo-American Oral History project in partnership with the Houston Public Library and also Houston Community College. Welcome, Dr. Mathur and Nalini ji. I feel very honored today to interview both of you. And the famous Dr. Mathur, who has helped so many dignitaries with heart troubles to gain good health, along with Dr. Cooley and your team and a big team in Houston's famous medical center.
You're very kind.
We are extremely fortunate to have this interview. So welcome, and we'll just talk about all your experiences today, both of you. And now, let's start with where were you born and raised, and where did you study? And please elaborate on your childhood and your education in India.
Well, I was born in India, of course, in UP, in the city of Kanpur, and most of my medical education and some other education was in Lucknow.
Mm-hmm.
And the medical school that I attended is known as King George Medical University. At that time it was called King George Medical College.
Okay. All right. And I know that you came to Harvard and Tufts Medical College.
Yes.
Well, which year did you come here, and why did you go back to India after that?
I first came to this country in 1962.
62, okay.
Actually, I remember January 7th, 1962.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason at that time I came, I wanted to become a specialist, and the subject I had selected was cardiology. And as you know, Boston and particularly Harvard Medical School is world famous, and in cardiology it was really famous. So I was very fortunate that I was able to come and get some of my education and practice and training there.
Okay.
That was the main reason I came.
In 62 to Harvard?
In 62.
All right. And what made you go back to India instead of remaining in the United States?
Well, when I came for my education. And as soon as my education and training, especially in cardiology, was completed, I was fully committed to go back to India and work there. And I was very fortunate that I got selected to the famous, it's called AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, in absentia. I never went there for interview, but I was very familiar with that, and I had done 1.5 years of training there before I came to USA.
Okay.
So I was very well known to my head of the department, so he wanted me back there, and I was very happy to go back and serve.
So which
I
year?
stayed for about 4.5 years. I went and served at All India Institute.
Okay, which year did you go?
We left in Boston in 1967.
67.
And came back in 71.
That's right, you came back 71 to Houston.
Not directly to
Not
Houston,
directly.
via Boston.
Oh, via
Because
Boston.
Houston, I had no connection at that time.
So what
All
motivated
my training
you?
was in there.
Okay. What motivated you to come back to Houston?
That's
or
a
United
little,
States.
Yeah, that is a little more difficult question
Ah,
to answer, but it's also a little painful.
okay.
Because I'd rather not say
Sure,
things.
we honor.
No, because the reasons I came are not very complimentary to our home motherland.
All right. And
But let me just summarize in
Sure.
2 sentences.
whatever you'd like.
One of the reasons was, in order to survive in Delhi at that time, there was only one way, and that was to go in private practice, because the salary All India Institute was at that time, and it still is, a government institution. So the salary is what government decides the salary should be. And we were not allowed private practice.
I see.
So the salary at that time was roughly about 2% of the private practitioners my colleagues were making. So I survived for 4.5 years at 2% of all my colleagues were making, who were not able to get to All India Institute because this was very difficult
That is true.
position. So eventually it became, I loved teaching and research. So the only way to survive was private practice, and in private practice there is no education, no research, no teaching. And the reason why I came back was in places like Boston, and especially here, once I came to Houston, I was able to combine all three.
Oh, excellent.
Teaching, research, and patient care.
That's excellent.
So it forced me, it was painful, because professionally I was extremely happy. And in New Delhi at that time at AIMS, I was helping something like 50, 60 patients every day. So it was extremely gratifying. And I was very happy with the professional work, but it was difficult to survive. And especially, you know, my friends who were making 50 times more than I was always were teasing me every day that, why are you doing this? Who are you trying to show? Who are you trying to prove? But I wanted to continue teaching and research. And I may add a sentence here. I can call myself almost a born teacher. I've been teaching since the age of 14.
14.
And at the age of 21, I was officially an instructor.
Oh, you have
And
teaching in your blood.
I've never stopped that.
Houston is
Still it is.
fortunate to get you to Houston in 71. So you came in 71 to
71,
Houston, right? So how was Houston like? What was your impression and experience when you first came to Houston?
Well,
And did you have any language or cultural barriers?
No, not language
Okay.
or culture. But let me before that introduce you to my first introduction to USA,
Okay.
because that's very interesting
Yes,
also.
that is interesting. Okay.
That was in 62.
In 62, yes.
62, when I came, I had to go to...
I will interrupt. I wasn't with him at that time.
Oh, okay.
So
He was managing
bachelor,
it
yeah.
by himself at that time.
I was not married. I
Okay.
was a bachelor.
Mhm.
At that time in 62, we had made arrangements, and first I had to go through a few months of residency program before I could start my fellowship. And the first time we came, at that time in India, we were allowed to only take total of $8.
Yes, I know. I remember.
Only
I did the
$8.
same thing.
So the only way I could come was a friend of mine lived nearby, and he was willing to pick me up from the airport
Okay.
and basically transfer me to the hospital.
Right.
So he picked me from the airport and dropped me in the hospital, and I still had my $8 with me. But what absolutely amazed me was the difference in the culture and attitude, the very first experience of this country. The medical education director of the hospital, he of course knew that I'm coming only with $8.
Okay.
So he provided board and lodging, but he also said, come to my office in the morning. I got the message. I reached there late evening. So in the morning I go to his office, and the first thing he does was to hand me a check of $250. Because he said, I know you don't have any money here, and you will need for miscellaneous things. I know you have board and lodging, but you still need some money.
Yes.
So this was my advance for 1 month. And I thought, what a difference that he doesn't know me, he has never met me, and before I talk to him, he hands me over this.
That's
So
a good spirit.
that was the welcome to United States, and it was amazing.
Never forget that $250.
I'll
definitely.
never forget. My total salary in India at that time was much less than
Much.
that.
So when were you both married?
We were married in 1966,
Okay.
and
Before coming here.
before,
Coming back
no,
here.
66, he was visiting India.
Okay.
Our families brought us together and we got married. Then I came with him,
With him in 67.
like a
Yeah.
honeymoon.
66 itself.
66.
Yeah, so as his dependent, I came, I got to see the country.
Did you come directly to Houston or did you go to Boston?
Houston was our second thing. First
Boston.
stop was Boston. First home was Boston.
Okay.
So we were in Boston. That's where I came, and it was a winter time. The sight of snow and all that thing was so beautiful. I fell in love with this country at that time.
How about Houston? What was your impression when
Well,
you walked
my
into Houston?
entry to Houston again is very interesting
Uh-huh.
because the reason we came back to Boston because I didn't know anybody in Houston.
Mhm.
I did know in Boston,
right.
and my former chief was very kind. He said that you come back and we'll arrange something for me, and he did arrange, so we could survive for a few months. And during that time, I was searching which would be the best place, and I did go for different interviews, and finally I decided to join Houston because this looked that time very appealing because of its cardiology thing. So let me tell you something about Houston entry. There are two things that impressed me on the very first day. One was, which I later on found out, how much Houston has expanded between 71 and today. That was one thing. I'll tell you why and how. And the second thing was the way people work here in Houston and the attitude and the devotion to their responsibilities and work. Let me tell you about the expansion.
Okay.
When I landed here for interview, at that time, one of the doctors was assigned to pick me from the airport and then in the evening entertain me with dinner, etc., and this introduction. So he picked me. I was a hotel right next to medical center. So he picked me from there for the evening, and he decided to go to Vargos. I don't know if you know.
Yes, I know Vargos with the peacocks there.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So he decided to go to Vargos.
Okay.
He had been living in Houston for a number of years, but obviously he had never gone to Vargos. So we decided, he picked me up and we started driving on Holcomb Boulevard, which becomes Bel Air Boulevard.
Yes.
So after we crossed the 610 loop, we went about a mile or two, and he said, I don't find Fondren Road. So he decided to stop at a gas station and said, where is Fondren Road? And the gas station said, just a little more light or two. And then, so we started driving again. Then we reached near Chimney Rock, we passed that. Then there were a couple of other traffic lights. Then we reached Hillcroft. And now there was not much at that time, so it looked like a deserted place. So he said, I must have missed it. So we stopped at a second gas station to ask, where is Fondren Road? He said, you have to go further. So at that time, Fondren Road and Vargos were considered to
Far
be
off place.
boondocks.
Boondocks.
Because this gentleman, he was a doctor, living here for a number of
So many
years,
years.
could not believe that Fondren Road is that far.
That's the
And
expansion.
the restaurant.
If
So
you have
now
restaurant.
Fondren Road is probably way inside the greater Houston. So
Not
that's it.
only Fondren Road, but when we were coming from Boston to Houston, lot of people in Northeast didn't know much about Houston. They knew Dallas.
Right,
So
right.
Dallas had become famous
Right,
because
right.
of Kennedy's
Right.
assassination. But Houston,
Nobody
and
knows.
they thought that in Houston there'll be cattle roaming around.
Let me tell you the other thing about introduction to Houston. The same day that we returned from Vargos, he had the head of the medicine department. I was, of course, interviewing for medicine department. Cardiology in Baylor is part of medicine. So he had left a message with this other doctor who was my host that when you finish dinner, come back, then call me at this number. He had given his home number. So when I got back in my room at the hotel, I had a message from him that called me at this number also. So I called him. That was close to 10 p.m. So he talked to me, welcomed me and all that, and then said that tomorrow we'll start the interview. And can you imagine what time he asked me to come?
8 o'clock?
6:30.
6:30?
Right. So
That's dedication.
That is what I meant. That the dedication, first of all, he talks to me at 10 p.m. and then says we'll meet at 6:30. And he told me the room. I was so nervous that in the morning I may not be able to find that room. So it was not too far from the hospital. So after that I walked to the hospital, looked where the room is. So in the morning I don't find myself fumbling.
That is again
looking for the
dedication.
room. So I did reach there at 6:30, and there were about 30 physicians there. Besides the head of the department, there were another 30 senior members of the department. So that's where my interview started, and they had a printed schedule for the day.
Oh.
And when we looked over, I had to meet and talk to several people, and there were 2 10-minute slots. They call it bathroom break.
Oh, in between, otherwise that's busy.
Otherwise, it was every
Every
minute was
minute.
occupied. So I was very impressed with the work ethics of Houston, and especially that my first head of the Department of Medicine, it was Dr. Henry McIntosh. Himself had come here from Duke.
That shows your qualifications and how in demand your qualifications are as well. And you are well known to the Indian high officials, prime ministers and presidents that came here, several of them. And when Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao Garu came, my husband, Sri Bhaskara Mutyala, he helped them manage, and he had brought them with to your office as well, and you all treated their heart troubles so well. Can you please let us know some of those interesting and intriguing experiences?
Well, I was very fortunate to be in a position to participate in the healthcare management of these VIPs, not only from India. I was fortunate to take care of some head of the states and other VIPs from many other countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, Oman, and I may be missing some Egypt. So I was very fortunate to take care of several patients from there as well. But let me tell you, among the most gratifying experience that I had was with the very first big VIP, and that was the President of India, Sri Zail Singh.
Zail Singh.
That happened in 1982. I had already been here for a number of years, so, and during those years I had taken care of several VIPs from India as well as some business magnates from India. And so my name was known there, and particularly at AIMS, because not only I had some time in training there, then I was on the faculty there for about 4 years. So So my name was familiar to all of them, and when the question came of heart trouble, the team there decided to come to Houston, and they called me, and I was very fortunate, and he was a very, very gracious patient. And one thing that it's an interesting sentence that I used at that time. I had taken care of VIPs in India itself during the time I was at Ames. That most of the time, the VIPs and their families and their private physicians try to influence your decision considerably. They use all the tactics to. And when President Zell-Singh came, with him came two senior physicians, one from Ames and one from the other big hospital there. It's called Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital now. At that time it was called Willingdon Hospital. And then one of his relative who was a physician and two of his daughters who were physicians. So there were five physicians accompanying him. So the very first day when we received President Zell-Singh, we were just basically getting introduced and deciding what we'll do. And from it, so I asked him a very straightforward personal question in the presence of all those five physicians and some other close family members. I said, Honorable President Mr. Zell-Singh, I have to ask you a question. And that question is, do you want me to treat you as a patient or treat you as a president and VIP? Because as a patient, I'll do everything that I do for any patient, and I'll make sure that I do the maximum I'm capable of. But as a VIP, I may have to deviate from what I think is the ideal way because of pressures. He said, no question, treat me as an ordinary patient. And that was his gracious spirit and nature. And what that did, it did allow me to have the freedom to treat.
Make the right decisions.
One of the other physicians who was not from Ames was the Director General of PGI of Chandigarh. He was he had treated President Zell-Singh earlier, so he was accompanying him, and he was much more senior to me. He was the Director General of PGI.
Yes.
So I had to make sure that I have the freedom to decide. And once President Zell-Singh gave me this permission, then I did not feel intimidated at all. And anytime I was, of course, informing and consulting like any other. I wasn't ignoring them, but at the same time, I was able to take the right decisions.
Excellent. I know you were very actively involved in the transfer of knowledge.
Yes.
To India, Pakistan, and other countries. Now, my question in this area is, how successful is the transfer that is happening, and how quick or slow they are able to, and which country is advancing faster than the others?
I think India would be a perfect example. And when we started, that was in the late 70s or early 80s. At that time, real cardiology in India was practically unknown. And just to give you an example, in all of UP, which today you probably know, the population of UP is 200 million, which is 2/3 of the United States. At that time it was not that much, but anyway, there was not a single institution in all of UP, for that matter all of northern India, that could do real open heart surgery. So I felt like India is a place that I can be of some help. So I used to visit India at least once, but many times 2 or 3 times a year and visit basically the big medical schools there in the big cities like Delhi, Bombay, that now of course is Mumbai, Chennai, Calcutta, Bangalore, Jaipur, Lucknow, Kanpur. I was visiting all these, and one time Ahmedabad also. And all of them were in an extremely preliminary stage of real cardiology. There was not even coronary angiography being done commonly. Like in all of Mumbai, at that time there was only one physician that I could trust that he can do coronary angiogram. He was in Bombay Hospital. But all the others were complete novices and not properly trained. And same was true of Delhi. So I used to go and spend time with them, and sometimes they would organize an international or national conference, so I could participate in sharing some of our information with the big group of physicians, but spend time in the hospital with the hospital cardiologists and share with them whatever I could about this. And many of them visited Houston for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we were able to let them really observe closely how things are done, and that progressed very, very fast. And today, not only the big cities, but even what I would like to call tier or tier 3 cities have this facility, especially doing angioplasty, stents, and heart surgery. Even tier 3 cities have it today. So I think India has, in these 30 years, made tremendous progress, especially in cardiology, I can tell you.
Nalini, I know you are in a key role as you are part of a high society in Houston and very, very important activities. Can you please give some comments on your experience, what you like, what are the challenges are, like that?
Well, I get involved everywhere where he does.
Yes.
He just finished telling you how busy he was with the work. So he would get involved when I would get pulled into it, and then take it from there, and whatever I could do, we've done. We have been involved in Indian community related activities, cultural and social, and so wherever he goes, he starts it and I take over. And
I
so
understand.
we haven't finished any there's no particular project that I'm involved in. India House, I can say, I was very, very eager to have India House in Houston. And in the beginning, people did not have a very good feeling about it. They tried to discourage. And now it's flourishing. It makes us feel very happy.
Tell us about your children and grandchildren. How many children you have?
I have one son.
Okay, where is he?
He is
What
in
profession?
Washington, D.C. He's at Gallaudet University. He's assistant professor. And
not assistant, he's senior.
no, he's now currently working as the dean of the university. Joined as assistant professor. So he's in academics. I tried my level best that he follows his father's footsteps, become doctor, but he said that, Mom, I'll be doctor, but not the kind daddy. So he did his PhD from MIT in linguistics. And academics is his interest, and he's very happy, enjoying there. Grandchildren, I don't have any yet. Someday I'm hoping I'll have, but
I think she's being very modest. Can I add something?
Please.
In the days when I started here in Houston, I really was very busy. And before our son was born. Since that time, and after he was born, I used to leave for hospital before he left his bed, and frequently I would come home when he was already asleep. So Nalini did everything that any household requires. I was only taking care of the hospital and patients. I left in the early morning hours, came home late in the evening.
I used
and
to.
I used to tease. A lot of people used to ask her, "Your husband is all the time in the hospital. What do you do?" So my answer used
A
to
lot of
be,
Indian patients who came from India, that was their favorite question. So, Dr. Saab is so busy. How do you pass your time?
so let
And
me give you the
I-
answer to it.
No, but let
I
me-
used to interrupt, and I said, "She is the man of the house. Everything
but
that
but that
household-
diminishes my
no,
role.
No. In
I
household,
cannot be the man of the
in
house.
Man and woman of the
household, there are a lot of activities that are traditionally the job of the man of the house. She was doing every single thing. I had
Perfectly
I had absolutely
Doing things
nothing.
is okay. Making decisions.
Yeah.
My son was born with the disability of hearing deficiency. His schooling, which
Yeah.
school to take, what
Right.
programs to introduce to him. It so happened that God gifted him with good brain.
Yes.
So he kept picking up everything. He was in a oral program, hearing children program, so he picked up language. He went to Kincaid School, went to Princeton, MIT, so he's done
Became a professor.
superbly well. Yeah, I
You were
contributed.
what?
Well, I was there
That
to
is
help him. I
her
was there
credit.
to help
You
him.
were
That
what?
is, she
But
is
there
the
were
one.
times where we had to make certain decisions, and I kind of
You had to make for him too.
no, I
both
mean
of
made
you.
it without his.
For both of you.
with-
Yeah.
But
Right.
I was sure that his
Yeah,
support, and the biggest support is the money support you need
And
in
he
any
has
such
confidence in you.
He had confidence, and
No, I will give her the full credit for grooming my
Oh,
son,
yes.
our son,
Yes.
and making him what he is today.
What he is today.
And it was very difficult at that time to imagine that a person born with disability and difficulty and not able to hear, he can do PhD from MIT
Yes.
and honors graduation from Princeton.
Yes.
So she gets all the credit for doing
It is
that.
a fact. You get the credit.
Right.
And I want to get to, as you received so many, several awards, including Hindaratam. Please tell us some of those awards that are very meaningful to you.
I think for any professional person, the most meaningful award is the one they get from their peers. And the two
and those are
times,
the hardest too.
Hardest.
the two that I got being the best teacher
Uh-huh.
of Texas Art Institute, I got it twice,
Mhm.
5 years apart. So those two are very, very meaningful to me, and I really appreciate that. And then others from American College of Cardiology and other from peer group.
Okay.
Those are the most meaningful.
And now I want to ask about the future. What do you think of robotic procedures in health field, especially in heart-related areas? I'm just curious about it, about robotic technology in future health field.
Yeah, it is expanding.
Uh-huh.
And in our own hospital, for almost 8 or 9 years, we have been using robots for
Oh.
part of the surgery. It is not easily possible to do the entire with robotics, but in not just cardiology, but in many other fields, robotic surgery has gained prominence. And the more important thing is what we call minimally invasive surgery. In that, instead of the old-fashioned big incisions, which require bigger time, longer time to heal and more complications, they can be avoided.
Okay.
And robotic surgery for heart is already being done, and
Yeah.
our hospital is doing it. But to make it almost complete robotic, I think is very difficult.
Very difficult. You are instrumental in founding several organizations in Houston and very active in several important areas, like you mentioned India House and ICC and API. You were wearing
Yeah.
that a tie. Can you show that to the camera there? That's the tie that you Nalini ji designed when we had API in
Convention,
Houston in
yeah.
2005 convention. And Gandhi statue, etc. Please tell us some of these experiences.
Well, I think when I arrived here, there were already a few people in Houston, but very few families. But some of them had already initiated some group activities, and we were here in the days when one of our friends that I think you have already interviewed, Mr. Raj Syal, he used to bring once a month a movie,
Okay.
the
Indian movie.
old-fashioned
Mhm.
36, 35
Mhm.
millimeter
Mhm.
movie,
Mhm.
and project it in one of the halls of University of Houston.
Mhm.
And all the 70, 80, 100 people of Indian community used to be assembled there and watch the movie. So from those days, I was interested in community
Mhm.
organization. So ICC was my favorite. And although I was never looking for any power, so I never had any kind of title of ICC in my 30, 40 years. But I always helped from the day we were here until it was officially, I think 1973, official Indian ICC was created. And since then, I've been member and working towards its success. And India House is really the outcome, or you can say the birth of India House is based on ICC. And I'd like to point out for history purposes that when the decision was made to build a building, because the ICC at that time used to be run from the garage of whoever the president was. So we needed a building.
We need it.
When the idea came, then Nalini was designated as the coordinator
Uh-huh.
of the project to find land
Mhm.
and get the land. And she's the one who attended the auction where the
Oh,
property was purchased.
Oh.
So India House now, the property was purchased at an auction where she was the one.
Congratulations,
who
that is
yeah.
a great
And the reason
success.
was all these people who were involved with
Mhm.
this project,
Mhm.
they were too busy with their professions, and this auction was in the daytime.
Oh,
Nobody was available to go
right.
and be there to, bid on the land. And me and a real estate agent, we did the work.
Dr. Madhur, have you ever, or how did you attempt to influence any public policy for the betterment of Indo-US relations?
That is another of my, I can call it passion, but not as strong a passion as I have for India House.
Okay.
India House is my real passion, even today. But the other one has been that, and I can remember way back in 1984, I think it had to be. Yes, in 1984, 1980, when President Reagan was the first term started. At that time, Nalini decided to volunteer for some of the work because both of us were interested. So she picked up making phone calls on his behalf. So that
On election day.
that got us
Call people
interested in
to
the
come
election
and vote.
process. So at that time, one of the first Republican Texas Senator, Phil Graham, we were very impressed by him because he served in the Congress as member of the House of Representatives as a Democrat. And during that time, he had some opinions and projects that were more conservative rather than liberal, but he was a Democrat. And he kind of insisted that some of these should be done, and they wouldn't give him the leadership of Democratic Party. They were, of course, in majority for years and years and years. They wouldn't give him a chance, so he resigned and then fought the by-election as a Republican and won. And after that, the first election that he ran as a senator, he succeeded. And this time it was his second term after he had completed one term. So we were very much impressed by his credentials and devotion that he resigned from Democratic Party and became Republican. So we attended some events and we got to know. So what he used to do, he did it 3 times. I would get a call, say on Wednesday afternoon, that I'm coming to Houston tomorrow. I'm coming there tonight. Can you arrange a breakfast meeting with the Indian community tomorrow? I said, tomorrow breakfast meeting? But I was successful 3 different times that we had in our house. So he came and we were able to be good friends. We called them in the night and said, you better show up tomorrow. And they did come. So our interest in the Republican Party developed at that time. And we were able to talk to him on many projects, especially those that were interested that were of interest to India. And most recent example of that was about 6 years ago when ambassador was Dr. Ronan Sen. I think he was the same year, or no, a couple of years after Mahatma Gandhi's statue. So he was the ambassador. And that time, President Bush was negotiating with a nuclear arms deal.
Not nuclear arms. Nuclear energy.
Nuclear energy project. And the Democratic Party was not in favor of that. So he needed the support both from here as well as from India. And he called us and that, can you all have some connections with the politicians of this country? How can you help? So Ambassador Sen came here, and we had about 25 of Indian community leaders there. And he said, what is the interest of Indian government and India for this nuclear energy, and how we can talk to. So all of us talked to not only the representatives from Texas, but we contacted our friends elsewhere in this country and talked to them about about influencing their representatives. So I've been quite deeply involved with the Republican Party elections from then onwards.
Very good. Very, very interesting. I'm going into a sensitive subject.
Sure.
Being in highly visible and very significant and core health field in Houston, have you ever witnessed or noticed any discrimination personally or distantly?
You mean
one word.
against within the
Color or racial?
In one sentence, never. One word, I should say, never. And let me give you example of the opposite of that. Some of the patients that truly love me are not necessarily the VIPs and other dignitaries, but those of us who are not so fortunate, mostly among the poorer class, and many of them are Afro-American. They love me really very much. Anytime they come, they hug me and all that. And The reason for that is they can see that I don't have any feelings like that, and they know that I'm taking care of them.
I meant the other way. I meant
No,
the-
never,
Okay,
never.
never.
Among the educated and professional people, I have never had in this country.
Came across.
But let me just remind me of one very strange
Okay.
example of the other side.
Okay.
How affectionate they have been.
Ah,
My first professor at Harvard, his name, God bless his soul, Dr. Louis Dexter. I worked with him for a couple of years when I was in training.
right.
And during that time, or soon after that, I finished training with him. I was still for 2 more years in Boston, but I had a different mentor. That was the time I went to India and we got married and we came. So when we arrived, naturally we paid respects to him and visited. But in the 1 year that we were here, after both of us were here, we were married, there was only 1 year that we spent. After that we left for India. In that 1 year, can you believe that we were invited 7 times to his house
Ah.
for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Independence Day, etc., or some private function. Both of us went there 7 times, and I was not his fellow at that time. I'd already completed.
Yes,
And this is the level of affection that I have been treated.
Yeah.
So I have nothing but the best for all educated people here.
That might also answer my next question. That is, how integrated your family and you are in Houston mainstream community?
You want to answer that?
How
Integrated.
integrated?
Your family and your.
If you
all
mean
are-
integration, that we have a bunch of American friends,
Yeah.
I'd say no, because I'm a very private type of person, so I don't go out and make a lot of friends. But whenever we go out within the professional community and his colleagues, their families, we have very good. I mean, we are treated
Mhm.
as one of the community, and we treat them as our close friends.
Okay.
But other than immediate neighbors, sometimes not even that.
Yeah.
I don't have I don't have a bridge club, I don't have that, because that's partly because
Yeah,
I am
right,
that
your
way.
personality,
Yeah.
right. What major events like 9/11 in the United States influenced personally or professionally?
I think the first event that has left a very important memory and mark was President Kennedy's assassination, because I was in Boston at that time,
okay.
and you can imagine what Boston's feeling was, because President Kennedy belonged to Boston.
Yeah.
He was educated there, lived there, his family lived there.
He was born
When-
there.
Of course,
He was born there.
he was born in Boston. Yeah. So when he was assassinated, there were 72 hours of non-stop TV without any commercial, and I was glued to TV as many hours as I was not in the hospital. So that left a very prominent mark in my memory. But I'll tell you what was somewhat shocking to me. The biggest shock came on the day of the assassination. It was at that time 1:30 in the afternoon in Boston when he passed away, and there were not TV, radio in every room,
Right.
but there was one TV in a big floor ward. So everybody went there, and we learned within a few minutes that he has been assassinated. And I could not work after that. I stayed there and talked about everything, but at 4 o'clock that same afternoon, we had a statistics class that I had decided to attend to improve my statistics. And I go there, and I was thinking that there will be 5 or 6 persons there, and he will decide not to do anything because everybody was absolutely struck. So he comes, the teacher comes there, the instructor, and there were about 50 people in the classroom. And he said that this is such a shocking thing. And the sentence that came out from his mouth, I can never forget. He said, well, this is a professional hazard. I said, what is this man talking? Where is he living? He says, a young president has been assassinated. And he's saying this is a professional hazard. And he went about his class. I had to leave. I could not handle that.
But I will call this particular reaction, his reaction and your cultural.
Cultural difference.
It's very cultural.
It was a big cultural shock to me that somebody can utter
we
these
feel
words.
so
And I've never forgotten that sentence or his face of that person.
Okay, I want to ask you more practical, I guess. What do you think of interracial marriages? And also, I want to further ask you, what do you think about the future generations of Indian background in Houston? Will they maintain their identity as Indians for a long time, or will they be mixed in the melting pot? So,
Okay, can I answer that?
Let me ask
I
you.
want both of you to
I
ask.
want to ask you first. Are you worried about that? That
No, this
interracial
is-
marriages
This is
should
not
be
my
concerned?
personal.
No, or people.
People.
Not you. I mean, would people be concerned about that?
It's just to find out what our first immigrants,
first
immigrants,
immigrants,
feel and think, or worry or not worry, like
Well,
that.
Yeah,
So,
in that context, I understand, but
Okay.
so what do you think? Go
Anyway.
ahead and tell us.
we were
Then
all
Dr. Madhav will tell.
part of it, and we were very concerned that our child should know our religion, our child should know how we live, how we respect elders, what customs and cultures we follow. So we taught them, and they followed it. But some of them have gone and made their own choices. So I personally don't consider it a change or a bad change. It's a change, but I don't consider it bad.
Let me add something to this. This is the kind of theme or topic that I have had occasion to address. And,
Interesting.
And I have a favorite sentence, and that is for the first 25 years of staying in Houston, I was very concerned that we are going to lose our heritage and our culture because the second generation, our children, were wanting to completely discard and disown anything Indian and were adopting everything American. But when the second generation became full adults and working, and their children started becoming teenagers and all that, I had to completely reverse my fear because, and I've said that to many, we both are very much interested in music.
Okay.
So we have had the good luck of attending several graduations and that kind of events for children. And one sentence that I have repeated many times, I was afraid when we were exposed to our children, which was second generation, but now seeing the third generation, I have no fear at all, because this, the same children of ours who were wanting to discard everything Indian, now are forcing their children to come back. So the third generation is, I am sure you know how many dance schools and music schools are in Houston.
Temples
And I would say
all that.
hardly any child today who is a teenager from our generation, most of our grandchildren, no teenager
of our generation, yeah.
when of our
But the
grandchildren.
interesting thing is they are bringing their friends, American friends,
Into
into our culture. are showing interest in
So
our country.
you attend
So the
any-
assimilation is taking place from both ends now.
But I think
Yes.
It is an
interracial
exciting
marriage
thing.
will strengthen it rather than weaken.
Right. I know we're getting close to concluding. I know you have published how many books? 30?
Not too many
30?
books, but
9? I know I read
and-
somewhere.
and not that many books, but
So-
I published about 170
Yeah.
publications.
170 publications.
My
And
son has published a book.
books. Very good. And we didn't get a chance to talk about all the publications and all that. Maybe we can have another interview in the future.
Now,
And-
I can maybe summarize in one sentence.
Okay.
But I think my research has contributed to this country.
Mhm.
When I started here in Houston, at that time, bypass surgery, which everybody knows, heart bypass
Mhm.
surgery, was very much going on in Houston, but all over the East Coast, including Harvard,
Mhm.
Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington.
Mhm.
They had not really picked up, and they were extremely critical of that. So when Dr. DeBakey and Dr. Cooley
Mhm.
published their good results of surgery,
Mhm.
all the big shots of East Coast were highly critical
Mhm.
and dubious about the validity of the results.
Mhm.
So I was fortunate enough to publish the very first publication in the world literature,
Uh-huh.
which gave, through a randomized control study, credibility and proof that bypass surgery is not a hoax.
Mhm.
It is real
It
and
is
it
real.
benefits people.
Yes.
And it was hard to convince the East Coast big shots, but they could not really ignore the randomized study proving that. And then slowly, now of course, it's worldwide popular,
Right,
but at
right.
that time, even USA was critical of bypass surgery. So I was
Excellent. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And I know we also didn't get a chance to talk about your valuable experience with Dr. Cooley and your experience.
More than 40 years.
Yes, yes. We didn't get a chance to talk about that.
You
as
will have
well.
to write a book now to include
Yes,
all
yes.
those
Yeah,
But,
experiences.
but I am so happy and fortunate for to talk to you both and talk about your experiences and about what you have contributed to Houston and your experiences in Houston, and we thank you extremely.
I'm very
Humbly
happy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Oral History Project, Indo-American Oral History Project, and Foundation of Indian Studies, and myself, we all thank you for coming here.
We are
and,
very happy and honored that you asked us, and especially Dr. Vavilala, who
Thank you
is the
very much.
founder of this Indo-American Oral History Project and also founder of Foundation for India Studies. I have supported that organization in the past also, and I think
But
it's
I
a very
had to
good one.
convince him to come and do this
Thank you for
interview.
convincing him. Thank you, and thank you. We are Foundation for India Studies and Indo-American Oral History Project, HCC, and Houston Public Library. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was so pleasureful to join.
Nice meeting you.
We are continuing our very interesting interview with Dr. Mathur and Srimati Nalini ji. And Dr. Mathur, I know you have lots and lots of experience, working with Dr. Cooley for 40 years, and also about your publications. Please go ahead and let us know some of your interesting experience that you would like to share with us.
Thank you. Excuse me. It has been really my privilege and honor to have the opportunity to work with Dr. Cooley and his associates for more than 40 years. And Dr. Cooley is a person that I'll call, he's not really a regular human. He has to be a superhuman. And the more you know about him, the more impressed you are about him. For one thing, it is sometimes very difficult for many of us to remember the long names that some of our Indian,
Especially Indian
specialists
names.
are. Some of them are very, very long, and some of the names from the area that you come in,
Yes, yes.
especially Kerala, Tamil Nadu,
Yes.
Andhra. Some of them are extremely long names, and everybody else has difficulty in remembering them.
And also hard to pronounce.
Dr. Cooley, you won't believe, has amazing memory and recollection of names. It has happened so many times that we are talking about some previous patient, and I have to bring up that patient by giving an example of something that he had or some complication. He would say, "Oh, you mean Mr. Sundaralingam?" I said, "Yes, yes." I was shocked that he not only could pronounce the name, but he remembered who I'm talking about.
Full name.
Full name. And he has remembered many of the names. So he also has a little soft corner for India. He has himself been to India at least, I would say, 5 or 6 times. And twice I had the occasion to go with him to India because they had organized a big international conference.
International.
And they invited both Dr. Cooley and myself. So I had a long chat with him in the flight, and then once we were there in the hotel and other things. So at that time I got to know him at a personal level a lot. Not only he's brilliant, he has amazing memory and memory of names. And the thing that made him famous is not just his skill, but the way he performed surgery. The reason why the results of surgery at Houston and Texas Heart Institute have been so glaringly different than others is the skill that he has. And the skill is not only in actual surgery, but the speed of surgery.
Speed.
Because in something like open heart surgery, as you probably know, for the actual duration of the key segment of the operation, when the heart-lung bypass machine is operational, all functions of the body are suspended and they are running on the machine.
On the machines.
So longer you have to use the machine, more damage you do to the body. So if the operation takes 3 hours of that segment, the body gets a lot of damage, and if you have a little unhealthy body, then the complications make it very bad. And because of the speed at which he does the surgery, besides perfection, the results have been very good because this time has been compressed compared to another time. And I just yesterday there was news about our former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. He got a second operation, didn't he? Yesterday or day before, something like that. When he had his first operation, we read in the papers that the operation, he had a quadruple bypass. Quadruple bypass. They spent 8 hours in his surgery, out of which I'm sure plenty of time, probably 3 hours, were in the open heart segment. So at that time, we were doing 40 open heart operations every day. So we couldn't believe how can they take 8 hours in doing one bypass operation when we do 40 in one day. So what it is when you watch Dr. Cooley operating, it doesn't look like he's slow because he does not have a wasted motion. So when no motion has to be repeated or corrected, then it doesn't take time. So when you watch him, it looks like it's so easy, and he's doing it without any effort, and the operation is over. You say, how could it be over? So that is his genius. And the results of open heart surgery at Texas Heart Institute, we are very proud of. And one particular statistic that comes to my mind, how we got that kind of experience in Houston. This would be somewhere in the late 80s. I don't remember the year. It could be 1988 or 89 or something like that. There were some statistics from New York. That particular 12-month year, they had done in all the state of New York something like 800 open heart operations. And at that time, there were 38 hospitals in New York State, 18 of them in New York City, and the remaining in other cities of New York State. Out of those total 38 hospitals, this is the number they had done. And that same year, in St. Luke's Hospital and Texas Heart Institute, we had done 900 plus operations in one hospital. So that's how we got the experience. While others were doing 20, 30, 40 a year, we were doing 900 a year. So everything that we did gave us a lot of experience. And I have got the best memories of patients recovering fast and doing so well that I was participating in all these things and enjoying the good results, and that was very good. And with many happy patients.
Happy, healthy patients.
And Dr. Cooley had confidence in his colleagues. So the way all these 40 operations a day could be done, he would stick to only his time of actual surgery. The rest of the time, he completely gave the authority and responsibility
Freedom for other
and freedom
physicians
to manage the patient. So as a cardiologist, I was taking care of the patient just as we send him inside the operating room up to that point. And the minute he came out of the operating room, I was in charge again and taking care of him. So much so that many of my patients think I'm the surgeon because they see my face when they are going in and they see my face when they're coming out. And then I'm taking care of them till they leave the hospital. So if you ask a typical Indian patient of mine who has come from India, he'll say, I did the surgery.
But that's important. I mean, that is one segment, and then taking care of the patient and all the good result to come is depends on the care afterwards too.
And everybody is doing his part in a very expert way.
One of the things that especially patients who came from India were very, very grateful that we were able to combine the skills of Dr. Cooley and his team in surgery and the personal care and the culture that I brought from India. Because in Indian culture, there is a very close relationship between two human beings, whether it is family members or it is a professional membership. And even today, when I go, lately I've stopped doing actual procedures myself. Previously, my passion was doing catheterizations, placing stents and all that. But now that I have given up as I'm growing older. But anytime I go to hospital intensive care unit where I literally spent my life, I get hugs from all the nurses. They say, oh, Dr. Matur, you're coming. So that affection that I experience from the staff has been unbelievable.
Okay.
One more thing, if I can add.
Please.
Some of my most prized possessions, there are about 10 or 12 letters that I received from widows of patients that after several years we could not keep them going. But some of them I treated for 7, 8 years, some for 15 years, some for longer. But we could not save them after that. The letter that they have written, handwritten letter, expressing their gratitude.
Mm.
Every time I even think of those letters or look at them, I cannot stop my tears because they are my prized possession. Because,
That's really a glad of
yeah, that tells me that what I did was worth it.
satisfaction
Was
and
worth it.
reward
And that is, otherwise, how can anybody spend 12, 14 hours in the hospital day after day? It was because of this love and affection and gratitude that you receive. And when you see the smile on the patient's face and the family member of that patient, that is what makes
But
it
this
worth it.
phenomena is changing so fast.
It's partly my Indian culture.
That was his thing, but now hospital is more automated, more computer oriented,
less personal.
less personal. That would be a really sad thing to happen to medicine in this country.
So, what do you think of the future of
I
our
think,
Houston Medical Center?
Yeah, I think a lot of changes have already taken place, even in St. Luke's. St. Luke's used to be called St. Luke's Episcopal Hospital because Episcopal Church owned it. It was a non-profit, but they were in charge. So they, at corporate level, all the trustees were those picked by the church, and the chairman of the board of trustees of St. Luke's was the bishop of Episcopal Church, always. This past year, 2013, the church sold the hospital, and now we are owned by Catholic Charities Initiative.
Another
So,
church? or
another,
just a
yeah, it
Catholic
is the largest entity running healthcare facilities, 79 in the country.
Really?
Catholic Charities run 79. Out of those, I think 30 plus are hospitals. Others are other healthcare facilities. So they are now the owners of St. Luke's Hospital, and they also have relationship with Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Heart Institute. So gradually we are becoming part of Catholic Charities as an Episcopal Church.
But are there any major changes in
Slowly in administration, a lot of changes, but some of the changes that are taking place are the result of the new Obamacare.
Oh yeah, that is another
Its
big
official name
change.
is not Obamacare, but that's how
That's what
everybody
everybody
knows.
calls.
Affordable care.
Affordable Care Act is the official name, ACA. But that has made tremendous changes. And if you allow me to dwell on some of the changes, couple of them I would like to share because it
It's
may
down
be
to current
interest-
time, so it's important.
What it has done, the premise on which this Affordable Care Act was conceived and passed, the basic premises were incorrect, and they were hypotheses that were not based on solid evidence, and they have failed. But unfortunately, the administration is unwilling to accept that, and the damage is taking place in patient care.
Yeah.
So the two changes that
Doctor-patient
has,
relationship is changing very
and
much.
I'll tell you what
Jeopardy.
happened yesterday. Yesterday, because of that.
Uh-huh.
Yesterday, I had a couple that I have been taking care of for a number of years, and they're husband-wife, and they have their own independent business, and both of them help each other in running that. Yesterday, they had made an appointment, and they both showed up. The husband has crossed the age of Medicare, so now he is covered by Medicare. And he had Medicare AARP
Okay.
supplement.
Okay.
And he was in part of a HMO, I hope you know HMO is Health Maintenance
Yeah, right,
Organization.
right.
And one of the rules of HMO is that you have a certain group which are members of HMO, and
Yeah.
those are the only physicians that the insurance will cover.
Correct.
If you go outside of that, then you are like a self-paid
Yeah.
patient. The wife is still not Medicare age,
Okay.
so she had a regular
Mhm.
insurance.
Mhm.
So both of them came fully expecting to be seen.
Oh.
When they arrived, we saw they had different
Gotcha.
insurance card,
Yes.
and then we had to very sadly tell them that the husband's insurance has eliminated me from their insurance coverage. So if I see him, insurance will not
Will
cover
not
his
pay.
expenses at all.
They
Or
have to
any
pay.
test, it will be like complete. He has to pay all
Yeah.
of it. So Medicare will not pay either, because if they say he's not covered, then Medicare will not pay, and this ARP insurance will not pay. So they talked to the insurance agent, and they spent. I asked them that I'll be willing to see you anyway, but talk to the insurance agent if they can do something. So they reached the conclusion that in a few days they can change the insurance, and they will rather wait and not accept my
Oh. Generosity.
generosity and take an obligation
Mhm.
for that reason. So I saw the lady.
Oh, okay.
I saw the lady.
Yeah, she has insurance.
Completely, she has insurance.
Mhm.
But husband, I felt so bad. That was
Oh.
yesterday. I felt so
But
bad
that's
about
not
that.
your doing.
No, it is not
The-
my doing.
the-
It-
But
it
this
changes
is
in his-
this is
new
the change.
circumstances, yeah.
And what it has done personally to my life, again, it may sound like I'm trying to complain, but it's a fact.
Reality.
It's reality.
Yes.
On many days, because of the compulsion to use a health, everything computerized health record, we are required, and if we do not fulfill that, they test it for meaningful use. So if they find that I'm not doing meaningful use, I'm just kind of passing over it,
Mhm.
then I don't get paid.
Yeah.
So because of that, I have to bring home homework which I had not done in 50 years of my practice. I had not brought anything
Yeah.
of the hospital home to work. The only thing I did at home was research part. But patient care material I never brought home. I had taken that decision that when I come home, I'm family. Because that was so few hours for
Yes,
family
yes, it
anyway.
is. It's few hours.
But now I have to bring it home, and there are many, many days of a week, sometimes 3 days in a week, that I sleep at 2 o'clock or later
Uh-oh.
to complete this electronic medical record.
Mm.
And that is my personal thing, burden.
Lot of
And
burden.
you can imagine sleeping at 2. What it's like.
That is tough, both the
Yeah.
doctors and patients.
And in new care,
A lot of uncertainty to patients.
Yeah.
unfortunately, what is
Yeah.
happening because of that, 1/3 of all doctors have already stopped taking care of Medicare patients. And many more will in a year or two, because I am somewhat more tolerant and patient, so I'm willing to do that. But I doubt that majority of doctors will.
Old-fashioned too.
Yeah,
Little bit of-
majority of younger
yeah,
doctors will not
yeah.
do that.
Too much headache.
So the quality of care will go down, and that was one of the premises, that they can improve the quality of care while simultaneously cutting the cost. They are contradictory to each other. It cannot happen, and it's not happening. The quality of care already has gone down, and there are now restrictions because of this new law, restrictions, and the day is not very far when somebody who is 80 and over breaks a hip joint, and they will say, well, you are too old for any surgery. The day is not too far when that may happen.
On that sad note.
Yeah, but I want us to get back to our good notes.
Yeah.
Now tell us about what other organizations or associations that either you founded or actively
Well, I will
helped
not.
founding.
I will not take credit for founding any. I did help to support many. The only one that I would say creation that Nalini and myself will take is India House.
India House.
Because that one from day zero we have been involved, and not only involved, very actively involved.
Actively.
Both time-wise and financially. But in terms of support, we support at least 20 to 30 national charities. Many of them are health connected.
Health connected.
And of those, I'm very fond of veterans. And I support, I think I counted that day, 9 veterans organizations annually, because my career started at Veterans Hospital here in Baylor College of Medicine.
Yeah.
Baylor College of Medicine from day one of Houston. And first 3 years I spent at Veterans Hospital and then at St. Luke's.
Excellent.
So I'm very fond of that. And another 20 or more national organizations. And among the Houston and Indian organizations, I'm certainly member of all national societies where Indian have a separate organization, like API is one of them, which I'm very actively participant. And I had the honor and privilege to run the annual convention in Houston.
In Houston in
2005. And American College of Cardiology has a Indian connection, Indian organization. I'm a life member of that. And there are 2 or 3 other professional, like Texas Medical Association, Indian, etc. But in Indian community organizations, I'm also very deeply involved. We visit at least, I would say, 10 or 12 Indian temples, and not just Hindu, but many other Indian also, and support them.
Okay.
And we support several art-related organizations, including dance schools, music schools, tabla schools, cultural organization, etc.
Symphony.
Houston Symphony. So we are supporters and participants.
Very good.
in many of these.
Now, I want to ask you, what would be your message that you would like to give to a newcomers, maybe in the health field, to Houston?
Well, we do welcome and encourage young students who are in medicine or want to go to medicine, or already have completed but now they are trying to come for residency and specialized training. We help them, and the help is all round. I'm not the only one. Most of us try to help. But unfortunately, the future of immigrants in medical field is not very promising, because there are so many medical graduates from this country, and then there is equal or more number of American medical graduates from the neighboring countries. Countries like Mexico,
Islands.
and many islands, they all have medical schools with 500 annual graduates, whereas in USA itself, most medical schools graduate only 120 or 150 graduates per year. And these people are graduating 500 per year, and most of them are American citizens. So when they come back here, they do get some preference, and they are now overcrowding all the available training positions. And at a given time, it's very unfortunate, but about 5,000 medical graduates from India are in this country looking for a training position like residency. It is becoming very hard. I have been very fortunate that I've been able to help several of them actually enter regular residency after they spent few months with us as a observer.
Yes.
Many of them. And only yesterday, a medical student from Pakistan came, and she is in the final year of her medical school in Islamabad. So she wants to spend the summer here to see how we practice. So we accepted her yesterday.
I think our niece Monica did do some observing or something like that in your area.
Monica, last name?
Mutyala.
Oh, she did, yes.
Right.
Okay.
You mentioned to me when we met.
Yes.
Right. That's
Yeah.
good.
No, we have several, and some of them have had outstanding, because we are talking about history of Houston. Let me give you a very good example.
Okay.
I don't know how long you have been in Houston, but if you remember,
You want-
40 years ago, there was only one Indian store. It was called J Store.
J Store. I remember when we came in '81. That's J Store is the only store that was
Okay.
there.
You know why it is named J Store?
No, why?
Okay, it's named after a boy, J.
Oh.
His parents, Mahesh and Rupa Vyas, they opened the store, and J is their oldest son,
Son,
so
okay.
they named the store
J
J.
Store.
When he was in high school, he was doing his high school at Kincaid. When he was in high school, there is a requirement that you spend 1 month as an intern in any field.
Okay.
You can go to a lawyer, you can go to a dentist, you can go to an engineer, businessman, or anyone, and spend time to see what they do, any profession.
Okay.
So he, at that time, back in those days, my name was quite a bit around in Houston community, and I knew Mahesh and Rupa Vyas. So they asked me, would you mind if he works as a high school senior? I said, sure. He was very, very bright, brilliant. So he spent 1 month, and he learned so much that the nurses thought he's a resident. Because he happens to be quite tall also, tall and robust. So they thought he's a resident, and they were asking him from time to time, can we do this, can we do this, etc. Now he's a senior faculty member of Harvard and a gifted professor, and he's a MD, PhD in neurology and neurosciences. Now he's a senior faculty member at Harvard. So it is so gratifying to see him get started as a high school student. And I have another one like that also. You probably know him also. You know the executive director of Indian American Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Jagdeep Ahluwalia. You probably know him, Jagdeep. His son, Rohan is his name. He was also in high school.
High school too.
And
Okay.
then he asked through his parents. So I said, sure, come and spend a month. He has completed his not only MD but residency, and he's in his fellowship now. So these two are Houston boys from high school, and many who were in medical school and from that time. I spent. So it
Very
is
nice.
very rewarding to see the youngsters grow up.
I wanted to ask you, how often do you go to India? Do you get a chance to go to India? I know professionally you.
In the old days, I used to go once or twice, and I think one time, 4
Every
times.
time he went,
Both.
I
You
went
both
with
go.
him.
But now it's about once a year.
Once a year. You're still making once a year trip.
Yeah.
Before
Because
it used
that's
to be.
why, because the traveling has become a very
Yeah.
nuisance thing now, so it's no
Oh,
longer a
security and all
Yeah,
that.
traveling is not so much fun.
Right. Nalini ji, I would like you to give us some comments about how Houston influenced, or communities in Houston influenced you and your family.
Mm, I'm sure there is a lot of influence, and we have now lived so long in this city. It seems like we belong here.
You're part of
Yeah, right.
part of Houston.
As far as influencing me, only others can tell. I feel like part of
Yes.
it. Yeah.
And Houston is growing, and we're all
Oh,
growing.
the growth, the growth and changes in Houston, we have seen 2 ups and 2 downs. Now we're coming back again. In 80s, it was all energy. Houston was the energy industry. When we came, it was medical. They were coming new buildings every year, new
Right.
hospitals, and
Mhm.
a lot of growth in the health industry.
Mhm.
Am I right? This is still the biggest employer.
Is still
Medical
center.
center,
Medical
Houston is still
Yes.
biggest employer.
How many? I forgot. My husband told me, but I forgot.
I think it's over 100,000.
Over 100,000.
Then became the energy industry. Then energy bust. Everybody left, and hard to sell houses in those days. But we are coming up again.
I worked in energy industry for Chevron, and that's where I took my retirement. But
Houston really is famous for it being the energy capital of the world, and in many areas, even health industry.
Oh, yes.
In at least some fields of health industry, Houston is considered
Yes,
the
definitely.
top, and then NASA
NASA is that.
in the space
But
industry.
NASA reduced now, right?
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately.
it is going
Yes.
down.
So to answer your question, that how is it? We have very good friends here.
Uh-huh.
We have good restaurants. We have good entertainment,
Yes, yes.
and thanks.
Yes.
We are very content, very satisfied living here.
Very
I
hot.
wouldn't-
You both are happy Houstonians, right?
Yes,
Definitely.
definitely.
Again, thank you so much.
Well,
It
let
is
me
a
close
great
by
pleasure.
one thing.
Please.
I've been able to do whatever I have because of the blessings that I have had the privilege of receiving from many of my satisfied patients. And among them, at least 6 or 7 heads of international religious organizations. And I had the privilege of serving them, and they have given me their best blessings.
Blessed.
Even my stethoscope was blessed by one of them. You know Swami Narayan
Yes.
Sanstha, Babs Swami
Yes.
Narayan,
Beautiful.
Pramukh Swami blessed my stethoscope as well, besides blessing me. And similarly, many other big-time religious organizations heads have blessed me for taking care of their health. So I feel very privileged, and I think those blessings have made me whoever I am
You
today.
are.
So
Excellent.
I'm very thankful to all those.
Excellent. Thank you again. And thank you Foundation of Indian Studies and HCC and Houston Library and the Indo-American Oral History Project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.